Hi everyone, my name is Nandi Kaul and welcome to the first episode of the speaker series Online. Previously, the speaker series platform has hosted numerous individuals from the business community in person on campus. But now, our guest speakers will be sharing their experiences online via interviews, webinars, or live events. Today, we have a very important guest joining us, and it is my absolute pleasure to introduce Brian Flood, who's going to share his journey as an entrepreneur. In 2001, Brian became the business founder and CEO of tech startup Q1 Labs, a network security company that grew to be a world leader over 10 years, employing hundreds of New Brunswickers. In 2011, Q1 Labs was bought by IBM in what would become one of the largest acquisitions in New Brunswick's history. It still stands as one of Canada's most important IT success stories. Brian is known for his drive, creative solutions, and sporting analogies. A lifelong New Brunswick resident and UNB alumni, Brian graduated with a business degree in 1983. In 1985, he published a national bestseller account of the sporting history of St. John. A well known local former competitive rower himself, Brian was inducted into the New Brunswick Sports Hall of Fame with his late brother Henry on May 27th, 2017. Brian, welcome to the Speaker Series Online and thank you for joining us today.
Thank you very much, Nandy.
Before we talk about Q1 Labs, I must ask you, for a person who has achieved so much, what have been the formative influences in your life?
Well, I think I would start with my father. My father was a doctor. He was the chief of radiology of St. Joseph's Hospital for 35 years. His advice to me was build a product.
Okay.
My mother, she gave me a book to read. It was called Jonathan Livingston Seagull. Great book, still applicable today. I would say rowing. One of the influences early on in rowing was a crew called the Paris Crew. They were Canada's first world champions. From them, I learned you can compete with anybody in the world. UNB in Fredericton was a big eye-opening experience. My wife, Carolyn, she's been my bedrock foundation, along with my two beautiful daughters, Dr. Brittany and Dr. Megan Flood.
Thank you for sharing that, Brian. So, before Q1 Labs, what were you doing at the time?
Well, after graduating from UNB, I wanted to give rowing a full year of dedication. With my brother Henry, we had won three Canadian national titles in the pair event. I switched to a single, and that year in '84, I won two USA and two Canadian championships.
Wow.
Oh, thanks. Next, I wrote a book called St. John, a Sporting Tradition.
Correct.
In 1986, I joined 3AM in sales. And by age 30, I wanted to be in my own business. So I obtained the Don Cherry's franchise in Moncton and later another one in St. John.
Okay. And why did you move to the Silicon Valley and what did you learn while you were there?
Well, I wanted to figure out how to build an internet company. What did I learn? I learned a ton. Perhaps where we should start is how Silicon Valley had their start. And it really began with the sons and daughters of the university professors would go to Ivy League universities, and then they would stay in the East. Many of them went to Wall Street, but they wouldn't come back home. So Dr. Frederick Terman, who was professor at Stanford, he decided, why don't the students start their own company? And his very two best students who took his advice was David Packard and Bill Hewlett. And of course, they were the founders of HP, which was the founding company that really launched Silicon Valley.
Okay.
Now, the other part that I learned was, I'll call it the rocket ship model. And in my day, you took $35 to $50 million. Today's $50 to $100 million. And you're trying to build a startup. And the way the model works for the venture capitalist is 1 out of 10 will be a home run, and 9 will fail. And that's the lucky ones that get into venture capital. And to be honest with you, there's thousands of startups that never even make it into venture capital.
Okay. And in the year 2000, you were invited to a technology showcase hosted by UNB. Can you tell us
Yes.
about that day?
Well, I showed up, and there was 2 or 3 innovations that had come first. I was totally not interested. And then this young man by the name of Chris Newton stood up. He had a pair of sandals on and a pair of shorts, and he flipped open his laptop. And to me, it looked like he was taking an X-ray of the computer network. I immediately jumped on it. What I saw was my father had spent years reading X-rays, which gave visibility into the human body. Here was a young man giving visibility into the computer network. Just made total sense to me. And I began chasing Chris to do a startup. Believe it or not, he didn't know what a startup was, but he came to learn the adventure of the journey.
Yeah. And how did the name Q1 Labs come about?
Well, it was rather whimsical. I looked at Chris and I decided he reminded me of Q from the James Bond movie. And I chose 1 because we wanted to be number 1 in the world in internet security, and labs because Chris reminded me he was always working in a lab. So that's how I came up with the name.
Okay, that's interesting. Can you tell us a bit about your role at Q1 Labs as a business founder and CEO?
Yeah, sure. I think maybe one of the first ways I'll start with, I had spent about 400 days in total, sort of cruising around Silicon Valley. I wanted to do an internet startup, but there was a larger vision to what we were trying to do. HP was really what launched Silicon Valley. Q1 Labs, I was hoping could launch Fredericton and UNB. So I had flown Chris out. We cruised around the valley. I can remember taking him and standing in front of a rock. And there was a plaque on it in front of the HP garage. And I said to Chris, this is what we're going to do, Chris. We're going to come really big and then help other smart guys from New Brunswick. So those guys focused on, that was Chris, Sandy, and Dwight, focused in on product development. I had to do just about everything else. So I was in charge of incorporation. I was in charge of the legal. I was in charge of accounting. I was in charge of getting the early customers, lining up early financing, office space, and recruitment. And Chris, Sandy, and Dwight helped afterwards on the financing and customers, but early on their focus was customer development.
What was Q1 Labs' product, and did Q1 Labs introduce new products?
Yeah, well, I tend to like to keep it simple. So I think of the security stack as a triangle. So at the top of the stack is antivirus. Below the antivirus is firewalls. Below that is technologies called intrusion detection system, or IDS. We were a layer below that, and we were pioneering something that eventually became called security identity event management. We were picking up all the flows on the network, looking for a hacker breaking into the network.
Okay. So Q1 Labs was started in 2001.
Correct?
soon after the dot-com bubble burst. So, did that create any challenges for Q1 Labs?
Well, yeah. So I arrived in California in April of 2000, and I was spending 20 days a month in total for 20 months. But as soon as I arrived, the dot-com bubble blew up. It was like a giant vacuum cleaner. Everybody was leaving on the first train out. But what I had learned was if you were working on a technology in the network, you had a chance to build a company. And we were at the intersect of both networking and security. So it just made a lot of sense. So I stuck it out.
And what were the significant milestones in the early days of Q1 Labs?
Customer traction was big. That was a big milestone. Key hires and recruits. There's a lot of luck, when you're building a successful startup, finding the right people at the right time. I recruited Jerry Pond to be our founding chairman, and Jerry was instrumental in bringing some key help. Ian Cavanaugh, Jeff White, and our VP of Engineering, Chris Vanjoy. Fredericton was able to get Dave Wagner and Mary Jo Tebow, who came out of UNB, to join our team. On the financing front, I was able to line up 10 angels. The province of New Brunswick came in for a $1.6 million guarantee. And on the venture front, we were able to get NBIC and BDC to come in for a $3.3 million Series A round of financing.
Wow.
Series B financing was $14.4 million, with $20 million behind that. It was a good syndicate of investors.
Did you choose to have 10 angel investors, or did it just so happen that it became a number of 10?
Well, in the early days, I financed everything. So after spending about 400,000 US dollars into Q1, I was able to get angels to throw in 10 or 15, some of them 100, some of them 50,000. And it just helped us, in football analogies, to advance the chains. In other words, you just got to keep moving forward.
And was obtaining full intellectual property rights required for Q1 Labs to raise financing?
Yeah, absolutely, because the venture capitalist would have shied away from the deal. So it had to be a complete tech transfer.
And in 2011, Q1 Labs had over 1,800 clients in the United States and Europe,
Yes,
many of which were Fortune 500 companies.
absolutely.
Who were the earliest customers for Q1 Labs, and how did you get them?
Okay, so UNB became a customer as part of the IP transfer. Then in New Brunswick, we had Assumption Life, Government of New Brunswick, Alliant Telecom, and in California, we had Agile Software. Then with our Series A funding through the door, we were able to leverage our existing customers. We closed Texas Tech, Texas A&M, Florida State, Clear Channel, Carnegie, Harvard University, Hartford Insurance, U.S. Army, U.S. Department of Energy, Entrust, and Oracle, to name a few. We also had evaluation trials going at Motorola, Bank of Montreal, Exogen, SunTrust Banks, the U.S. State Department. Most of these became customers. And then we had a whole bunch of other Fortune 500 companies we had opened up conversations with, and they all eventually became customers. Our approach was direct sales.
Wow. It seems like your customers are from many industries. I guess any industry that requires tech security.
Very astute observation. Remember, UNB had a computer network. It was the ITS network. But every organization, government agency, and other universities around the world, they all have computer networks. So Chris was solving a problem on a computer network. So chances are, if he had that problem, everybody else had the exact same problem. as it turned out, we were right.
And what is the role of stories in developing Q1 labs?
I think stories are really important. I think stories is how people learn. And honestly, just about every tech company that starts is starting off a blank white sheet of paper.
Correct.
So really the only thing you have is a story.
That's so true. And in fact, that leads up to my next question.
Sure.
And as the Q1 Labs business founder and CEO, you planted the seeds and you grew the company into a global player in security intelligence. When IBM announced its acquisition of Q1 Labs in 2011, how did you feel about that?
Elated. We have succeeded where so many internet pioneers failed. And perhaps one of the things I'm most proud of is we made it to #1 in the world in the security identity event management space. And Q1 Labs IBM has maintained the #1 in the world for 7 years according to Gartner's Magic Quadrant. The technology is primarily built in New Brunswick by mainly UNB UNB graduates. We protect 22 of 25 of the world's largest banks.
Wow.
We have over 5,000 customers worldwide. We handle over 80 billion security events, and our product is in over 150 countries worldwide.
That sounds incredible. That's awesome.
Yeah, thank you.
And how did the success of Q1 Labs impact students at UNB and the province of New Brunswick?
So Q1 Labs, I think the story, it was HP, the great story. I like to think Q1 Labs put New Brunswick on the technology map. And so I like to think we were the ones who sort of launched the tech sector around UNB and Fredericton.
And are you working on any new projects or ventures now?
No, I'm totally retired, and I'm happily retired. I like spending quality time with my beautiful wife Carolyn and my two lovely daughters, Brittany and Megan, and I became a grandfather. So I'm happy
Congratulations.
to that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And as you know, the COVID-19 pandemic has been a challenge for everyone. And
Yes.
as we enter the new normal, what advice would you give students and entrepreneurs as they navigate these unique times?
Well, I think the trend from working home is a trend that's certainly there. I would say the key is to be a lifelong learner, develop your own skill sets, and constantly be on the hunt for new ideas. I think in business it's invaluable to start your career with a world-class company. I was lucky to start with 3M, and there's 275 lucky UNB graduates that have a chance to start their tech career with IBM. It really sets you up for all your future endeavors.
Thank you for that. And Brian, on that note, on behalf of the Faculty of Management, the team at IBEC, and the UNB community, we'd like to all thank you so much for sharing your experiences and journey with us today.
Thank you very much, Mandy. UNB is a great university, and I very much enjoyed talking to you.